Hello, good evening, and welcome to the NEETwork, the new podcast for all things NEET. I'm your host, Theo, and with me is my good friend Dexter.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the NEETwork.
Um, says in the script NEET current events, but I can't really think of anything current event related that really pertains to NEETs.
Well, how about theme events? Tonight's theme, we're going to kind of cover what NEETs do with all their not working time. There's actually been a pretty major event. I'm sure many people have heard about it, but Bethesda got purchased by Microsoft. That means they had to go through a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo. This has been news for a while. Well, it officially went through earlier this week. We're recording on the 13th. I believe the Microsoft Store put a whole bunch of Bethesda games on it, so that's pretty exciting. That means that it's coming to Game Pass, most likely.
So will that mean that future Bethesda games won't be dog shit?
No,
No, they'll still be trash.
they'll still be bad, but it'll be that kind of good nostalgic kind of bad. I mean, we can look at Microsoft's track record and see that they made Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts, which is really just a masterpiece, but not everything can live up to that.
Not everything can live up to that.
A ton of Bethesda games, new and old, are going to be coming to Game Pass. So that's pretty exciting news for any of you gamers out there.
Any epic gamers, yes, and that does pertain to the subject of the evening. Tonight, we are asking the question, when you don't have to go to work, what do you do with all of that spare time?
Well, the obvious answer is you play video games, you watch anime, and you self actualize, if you catch my drift. I know I'm joking a little bit here, but what do you do with all that spare time?
Well, podcast over, folks. We'll see you next time. Really though, the answer is pretty simple. It Dexter summed it up. It's whatever you want. And I would add the caveat, so long as it doesn't bring harm to anyone else. But we got to get this to about a half hour in length, so we're going to discuss a lot of common NEET pastimes, as well as some of our own favorite things to do. And probably the greatest time waster of them all, you mentioned it earlier, was video games.
I mean, it's a great time waster. There's a lot of things that can be developed from video games, but NEETs aren't necessarily focused on, developing a skill or anything. I guess some of them like to puzzle themselves or test themselves or work on something. If anything, video games almost feel like a job for some people.
I've definitely heard stories about, say, being in a big World of Warcraft raid guild where it's almost like having a part-time job.
Guilds are very demanding in those large scale
Yeah,
MMOs.
especially those really, really hard games. I guess if they enjoy that, that's one of the ways you can get more out of your gaming experience apart from just playing video games nonstop for hours on end.
I guess that's like that dream job that doesn't pay. So it's not really a job, you're not a wagey. I've got a friend who's in one of those guilds for Final Fantasy.
Ah, yes.
Anytime you try and hang out with him or talk to him, he's like, "No, sorry, I got raid night tonight. I won't be free until like midnight." It's like 3 nights in the week, every week.
When I was in high school, my D&D group had two really hardcore WoW players, and yeah, coordinating with them was a real pain in my ass. But I would lose an entire third of my group if I kicked them from the D&D group, so I couldn't just kick them. Getting the group together was hard enough as it is.
I respect the MMORPG kind of grind. That's that is for some people. I personally really like my own kind of JRPGs, my own business, kind of play a nice long single player experience, kind of get engrossed in a good story. I recently finished like 100%ing, getting all the achievements, finishing everything I could do in Yakuza like a dragon. Personally, for me, that kind of challenge is very fulfilling, more so than a lot of things at work. The only thing at work that even compares is finishing a really big project that you can see the effects of and feel proud of. But that's very few and far between. Whereas games, that's almost a consistent feeling. Like you can expect it and you can see the progress.
And some might argue that that's kind of a Skinner box effect, but you could put systems like that in place in like a job environment, but no one really wants to. It's just, oh, you work for pay and that's it. But completing, that is 100%ing any given game is a very good way to get the most out of a game. I like, or at least I try to do that with the most recent Doom releases, but I keep starting the game and then never getting around to actually 100%ing them.
Again, it's really about your enjoyment, I guess. There is no required way to play games, whereas, at work there is a required way for you to use your time.
That's true. You definitely, there's only one way to play a shooter. 100%ing Doom, I suppose, isn't really where I get the satisfaction. It's about killing the demons as skillfully as I possibly can, and that's where my enjoyment of Doom comes from, really.
And my personal enjoyment is chaining together as many demon kills as possible, just because I really like to listen to the music while I do that.
Oh yeah, the music gets you absolutely pumped.
It just makes you feel like a beast. And I guess that's a design choice by the game maker. I I've played it. I played them both, and I really enjoyed them. That's actually one that I didn't 100% though, just out of
Mm.
respect for the Doomslayer. I couldn't show him up.
Yeah, he doesn't need to be 100% powerful to slay demons. You mentioned MMORPGs and those long form games. Apart from, I guess, that satisfaction you gain from kind of increasing your skill at a given game, there is the social aspect of MMORPGs.
That's another thing to kind of think about, especially I'd assume for NEETs, since it sounds like it's an indoor NEET kind of hobby. It's not limited to NEETs, but indoor NEETs also don't have that external factor of socialization that comes with work.
Right.
So I feel like that could be a really valuable, almost important part of someone's life if they're not going outside to go and socialize with somebody. Because as much as we hate to admit it, humans are social animals. They do need some form of connection with another person.
Right, you do definitely get that very important human reaction, or that human contact is what I'm trying to say. I didn't ask, do you play any MMORPGs?
I I do not. Um, it's I like RPGs, but I just can never get into the MMO ones. They don't feel very personalized. It feels very made for the masses.
I definitely got that feeling from World of Warcraft. And also, when you say like personalized, the way that I felt when I played World of Warcraft is that it felt distant, if that makes sense. I didn't feel engaged or anything like that. It was just kind of like making your numbers as big as you possibly could and unga bunga-ing your way through Azeroth. I guess for that reason, I don't play a lot of MMOs, but I recently picked up Phantasy Star Online 2, and that game's actually a lot of fun, even for an MMO. It's more action-based RPG, kind of like Monster Hunter, but uh, more ostentatious, more like a wild battle anime than like what Monster Hunter is, which is more of a bullfight kind of game.
And what game is this?
Phantasy Star Online 2?
Fantasy Star Online 2. It almost sounds like an Elite Dangerous type.
No, it's you'd have to like watch some video of it. It's basically an action game, but also an MMO JRPG kind of game.
I'll have to give it a check.
Yeah. Anyway, I met quite a few pals playing it, and also because I modeled my character after like the neckbeard character, so I get an interesting reaction wherever I go.
So you're kind of role playing as that neckbeard neat.
Yeah, except he's like this badass anime guy.
Oh, so he's got his katana and
Yep, he's the katana class.
he's been studying the blade
Yep, absolutely. When he's been studying the blade. I can't remember that quote, but he studies the blade.
while you were out talking to girls. I studied the blade.
But yeah, that's a good some decent evidence as to the social aspect of MMORPGs, especially nowadays, since everyone is locked inside. MMORPGs can provide some essential human contact where otherwise we're not getting it.
It's actually, you briefly mentioned it, but it's actually a really sad time that we're in. Can't remember where I saw it, but somewhere depression and suicide rates are up massively among a lot of kids and even a lot of adults who are forced to stay home.
Yeah, the lockdown has really messed with a lot of us mentally.
It's that social impact that we're missing. You know, you can't just, it's really just such a hard situation to be in because, and I'm not expecting anyone to make the right choice. You take kids away from school, you know, you take kids away from their socialization, from having it to suddenly not having it, and not having it for, close to a year.
The kind of NEET who likes to stay indoors all the time largely wasn't affected by it, or maybe not too much changed, but I would imagine that isolation does cause, like, some kind of mental illness is a strong word, some kind of mental hang up, and in the future, I am interested in talking about mental health for NEETs.
It has definitely impacted many people.
A lot of normies are being forced to experience what a NEET goes through, I guess.
Exactly. I personally have never had a huge problem with kind of locking away in a room all day and kind of chilling. I was given the privilege of being a essential worker. Not necessarily that I wanted to be. There are some benefits to working, such as having money. It has left me in a situation where I can at least still physically interact with people.
Yeah, that is very tough to deal with for normies who have to get out there and do things. I don't know, like, what the ratio is, but I think most NEETs are fairly solitary people.
I would agree with that. I was talking to one of my friends who works in a fairly large scale company. It really feels like he's they sent them all home, and it really feels like he's missing that interaction. Another thing, going back more on topic of what we were talking about, he was kind of missing his neat hobbies. Not that he was a neat or anything, but he's kind of missing his workout time. He's missing his chance to go to gyms. He's missing his
That is
game time even because now his work kind of overflows into his home life.
You just can't escape from work even when, you're supposed to be locked inside. You have to work from home, and that's very sad. I feel bad for normies. But you did bring up an interesting point that your friend was missing out on his exercise time, and I don't know if it's just the places that I go on the internet, but what I notice about most of the kinda outdoor style NEETs is that they're very hardcore into the bodybuilding scene. And I don't know if that's just kind of how those people are, or if it's the places on the internet that I pay attention to, but it's like they're on some kind of social security, and rather than stay in their room playing video games, they spend a lot of their time at the gym. Would you say that's, like, accurate, or is it just me?
I would have to agree. It seems like a lot of these people that, I mean, I don't go to the gym super often. I know it's a shocker, but when I do go, it seems like there are people who are there and know everybody, but they don't seem to be working out as much.
Right, the gym is as much where you hang out as it is where you work out.
Yeah, it's a very gym bro scene where you gotta hang out with your
Yeah.
bros, right? You gotta watch your bro lift.
Yeah, right. Admittedly, if I was a NEET, I'd probably actually spend a lot more time at the gym. My current job, though, actually gets me a lot of exercise, so I almost don't really feel like I need to go to the gym right now.
I get the desire to work out. I actually am currently on a regime where I work out a few times a week after work because I don't want it to bleed into my weekend or anything. I like my relaxation time. But after work, I'll put in, a couple hours to work out. I've definitely seen improvements on my strength, which is really nice. It's good. I really enjoy the ability to grow stronger and may actually embrace healthy habits and not just kind of embrace all of the bad.
Embrace all the negative neat habits.
Not saying that, like gaming is a negative neat habit, but I definitely do it more than is per se healthy for me.
More than a normie would recommend you do it.
Yeah, I definitely do it more than a normie would recommend.
Well, like a normie will say, "Oh, you play too much video games," but how much time do normies spend sitting on their butts watching Netflix, right? So I gotta binge watch I don't know, Game of Thrones or one of those other normie shows.
Or, on their phones. I gotta catch up on my mobile games, things like that. I mean, that is true. It's easy to frown on a different medium and someone consuming that medium when it's not a medium you use.
Right.
But it just doesn't work that way. If you're in the end, you're sitting around and just kind of vegging out while you do something. In fact, I would argue that consuming video media is actually worse than consuming game media 'cause many games force you to think or at least kind of give thought to something. Where a lot of times video media is very sit there and absorb it, but don't necessarily do anything beyond it. A lot of the time, it holds your hand in what it wants you to think.
That's a very good point, and I hadn't thought of that. You're absolutely right. Video games do engage your mind, even if your mind is engaged in, I don't know, slaughtering demons. To watch, say, let's say Doom was a movie, probably wouldn't have the same engagement as Doom the video game. It certainly wouldn't. But there is still those that video medium that is appealing to NEETs. I've definitely done my fair share of binge watching.
I have as well. I've definitely done more than my fair share of cons, consuming consuming media. No frowning down on someone who likes to watch their favorite show on Netflix. I have my own shows that I could sit down and watch and absorb for, hours and days even.
I'm not sure exactly why, but I do kind of find it kind of tough nowadays to binge watch. I think the last thing I binged watches was when I'd broken my face and literally could not do anything else. And I made the mistake of binge watching Stranger Things.
I have not watched Stranger Things, but I think I'm still young enough to kind of justify binge watching something. And a lot of times I actually think binge watching is like, well, I have the time now, but I might not have it later. Although in many cases it's also just the fact that you're really into it, which there's nothing wrong with being into something. I know that a lot of video game players, kind of like myself, a lot of them also happen to be very, very into separate forms of media beyond video games. One of which, of course, is like anime and just general Netflix shows. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's this very interesting correlation between NEETs, both indoor and outdoor, and watching anime, and I can't quite explain it.
Is it potentially that though money is frequently brought up in these forms of media, it's not necessarily the primary focus? Like, very rarely does it focus on having a job or real life problems.
Hmm, that may be the case.
So it's just easy to kind of attach to something like that and create a self image for yourself on it.
Maybe you can go really actually this would be a great future episode, the appeal of anime, but I think like as a pastime, it's very easy to binge watch anime because many animes are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes long, and even like a pretty short anime is still a good probably 6 hours to watch a whole season.
Well, let's see. Let me just pull out my big brain real quick. So, assuming that every episode is roughly 22 minutes and there's between 12 and 13, I'm going to err on the side of the higher number, 286 minutes, which divided by 60, you get about nearly 5 hours rounded up. 5 hours of watch time for a good show, something that's kind of self contained. And that's your standard 12 to 13 episode one. But if you get to your more, if you start talking about things like, One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, uh, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
It had to be JoJo. We had to bring up
I
JoJo.
couldn't go without mentioning it. It's such an influential show, and it could be a good or a bad thing. Those start to take on, close to 50 to 100 hours for some people. I think I saw somewhere that One Piece is still being made, still being written, and it's like
Still being written.
I don't know what volume it is on.
Oh, some ludicrous number.
Let's see. As of December 1st, 2020, it's on volume 95 of the paperback, and I believe that's light novel.
But that seems really low for a manga.
Yeah, I don't think that's light novel.
Oh, light novel. Okay, yeah, the I bet the manga is way further along, as well as the anime. Yeah, the anime is like hundreds of episodes.
Yeah, it's the graphic novel that you're looking at. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but I want to say the manga is getting close to that like 1,000 mark.
Yeah, it's almost certainly getting close to the 1,000 mark.
Over 1,000 chapters.
Oh my god, over 1,000 chapters or 1,000 volumes?
The series spans over 1,000 chapters and at this time has 98 tankobon volumes, making One Piece the 25th longest manga series by volume count.
25th?
There's more? There's something that's higher than that?
There are 24 manga series that are longer than One Piece.
What? How?
That's what that says. That's how?
I'll have to look into that later. That
And what
sounds
are
like
they?
let me see.
Is there any like I've heard of? Because One Piece is the longest anime or manga that I can just name off the top of my head. There are certainly a lot that are still going that are older,
Let's see.
but they're not nearly as long as One Piece.
Number 1, Dakobin, whatever that is.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one. Dakoben.
So it was 25th. Yeah, One Piece is 25th with 1,005.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is there any that I recognize here? No, I don't recognize any of these. Granted, they're all in Japanese. So, oh, Detective Conan.
Oh, yeah, Detective Conan. That's been around a real long time.
Yeah, that's at 1,047.
And I guess like one of the appeals of anime as a pastime is just a huge variety that there is. Anime is pervasive enough that it's almost like a subgenre of that kind of nerd sphere as a whole.
I think its appeal is that it offers something for everybody. There's the shows for people who want to self-actualize. There's the show for
There sure
people
is.
who want to wink wink self-actualize. There's the show for people who want to kind of it's kind of cheesy at this point, but there's the show for people who want to self-insert themselves into a pretty bland character and go to a different world, live a different fantasy. Arguably a lot of NEETs want to do. They'd want to disengage from the current system.
Right. We'll have to talk more about anime and its general appeal in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this could easily get tangentialized.
Yeah, absolutely. And anime is such a wide subject that it should make a whole episode on its own. One last thing about anime, actually, I might want to add. There is apparently some controversy as to whether or not NEETs should watch anime.
What?
I guess some people will say it's like, oh, it's a waste of time. When you watch anime, you're not like improving yourself. You shouldn't watch it. And some people, I'd probably fall into this camp. It's like, it's my life. I'll do what I want. What do you think of that? At least a couple of the other NEET media sources, a couple of blogs and a couple of like one podcast mention this kind of argument. What do you think about that?
I I am of the believing that if I want to do something, I should be allowed to do it myself. You know, I don't need someone else telling me what I can and cannot do. That turns into a very slippery slope very quickly. I don't even think I've ever heard of the argument. I don't know what the argument is, why they shouldn't be watching or playing or doing whatever they want. It just sounds very petty. It sounds very
It is very petty.
it sounds very like, well, if you don't work, you don't deserve to profit from the system or benefit from any of the systems, which is simply just not how it works. I think that this is just a very large overstep of people who really don't get the right to tell me what I do. And really, when you think about it, a lot of NEETs kind of go this way. They go inherently against the system. They go against what everyone tells them to do anyway. So why are people telling them what to do? It's obviously not how it works for them.
Right. The NEET movement does not need
It doesn't need a commander in chief.
I would say the decentralization is the biggest strength of the NEETs.
Yeah, I would agree.
Like I said, that apparently within the NEET community there is some controversy as to whether or not you should watch anime. And this podcast will always be on the side of it's your life, do what you want.
Yeah, I don't understand the desire to step into other people's lifestyles and kind of tell them what they can and cannot do. Getting back to the topic at hand, personally, I know a bunch of people who stay at home. I don't know if it's because they can't get a job or because they just don't want a job, but I know a lot of them who laud endlessly about the benefits of recreational drugs. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, in my research for finding an active NEET podcast, I definitely have I've seen a lot of talk about the use of drugs and like their benefits. I don't really have any experience with drugs except maybe a little alcohol here and there. And I suppose to break the tenet of don't tell anyone what to do with their lives, the only thing I'm going to say is I would really encourage people not to abuse drugs in any way, but if something works for them, I say they should just keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both went to college. Uh, there was a fair share of people there who, they did their drugs that, sometimes would help them focus or study, and that seemed to work for them. I also don't have any experience beyond like a drink here and there.
Yeah, the way I see it is that just like any medicine, substances can help you in some way. I know I've used alcohol to like help me relax after work, and I think it actually does help me relax so long as I keep my dosage low. If you think of it like a dosage, then it's actually quite helpful as a medicine. Even if people think of alcohol as like a recreational substance that you should consume as much as you possibly can.
And this kind of comes back to that, like, what is a healthy habit to have? If it's not really hurting you, if it's not hurting those around you, and you really got to think about what is considered to be hurting you because, it might not be physically harming you, it might not even be mentally. Is addiction harmful or not? Is a question.
I'm in the camp of an addiction is harmful both physically and mentally. And I would encourage people not I mean, as always, I'll just encourage people not to abuse drugs that harm themselves.
And even the ones that are considered less harmful, still harmful, but less so. Moderation, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, always moderation. But what are some things that maybe we haven't mentioned that you like to do?
So we've covered video games. That's something I really like to do. We've covered working out. That's another thing I don't necessarily like doing, but I do because I probably should. I like getting stupid focused on something that kind of challenges me. Right now I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it before, but right now I'm working on learning Japanese. I don't necessarily think it is an easy language because it's so different from any other language that I can think of. I haven't gotten far enough into it yet to really know too much. I'm definitely by no means a master, but I'm learning, which is the good thing. That's the kind of things I like to focus on. It seems to, so far at least, make sense. It's just very challenging to learn things like the alphabet straight up.
Yeah, and that was my experience with learning Japanese. Is that's like here is all the hiragana. Learn them in 1 week, and I did. Now I largely have forgotten them. And for my own hobby, I think I've mentioned before that I'm picked up a saxophone pretty late in the pandemic. I've always wanted to be a bit more musical, and I started in the pandemic trying to learn guitar, but I think the learning curve for guitar is much higher than it was for saxophone. But then I got a saxophone maybe 6 months down the line, and I'm having a lot of fun doing that. You might say like getting stupid focused on something, but with saxophone there's almost like a state you get into where you're playing the music and you're just having a lot of fun. And even if I'm not really good at the music, I don't know, there's a flow you get into, and it may not be the best music in the world, but it's still music and you're still enjoying yourself playing it.
Saxophone's one of those instruments that no matter how you played it, it sounds sexy.
Yes, and it is a very sexy instrument. There are no like famous clarinetists, right? Except for Squidward.
The most famous, the most relevant to modern times. Whereas the saxophone, if you pick it up and you get a good jam, as long as it doesn't sound totally awful, it's gonna sound pretty good.
Yeah, it wasn't really that long before I started like actually playing music on it, and I'm at a point where I can more or less play along with any song that I listen to, provided it isn't too fast.
That's the kind of hobbies that I imagine everyone should kind of encourage NEETs to embrace.
Yeah, the kind of like artistic or educational hobbies like what you're taking on, self-improvement type stuff. I think when people think self-improvement, they most often imagine going to the gym, but self-improvement can take a lot of different forms.
And a lot of times people even kind of take on other things like art or drawing. I don't know, it's a lot like the meme. I'm a bit of an artist myself. Um, so I can understand, like, it's really nice to sit down and drop a bunch of time. I do really intricate drawings.
Oh, that's right, you did do oh yeah, I remember your art from what you were doing back in college.
Yeah, I like to do very hyper intense kind of focus art projects. It's kind of nice to it's kind of nice to just sit down and not have anything else to worry about and focus on it.
Yeah, and your art was, I mean, I'd like to describe it, but it's really hard to describe. I remember one thing you painted that was like, I think you described it as like your visualization of jazz music.
Yeah, that's extremely difficult to kind of explain. Very swoopy, very random.
Yeah, but when you look at it, audience, you'll realize that yeah, that looks like jazz music sounds.
I also have some other things that I've kind of worked on that almost look like those, not necessarily, I hate the word tribal tattoos, but that very, not necessarily random shape, but very black and white, uh, highly detailed, but there's no real direction to it. It's all just kind of,
If it's the one I'm remembering, I didn't really get a tribal vibe from it. It definitely looked like tattoo art.
yeah, I think you're thinking of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Don't think I have a
And
picture anywhere of it, sadly, but
oh well. I've dabbled a little bit in, I guess, 2D art for lack of a better term. When I was in high school, I tried my hand at like anime drawing, and I'm still, I guess, kind of sort of okay at it. But my big artistic expression was Warhammer. I Back when I had a lot more disposable income, I would paint Warhammer models. I never played the game, but I liked to kind of assemble and paint the models, and I was pretty damn good at that. Nowadays, I don't have the money to really collect Warhammer stuff anymore.
it's funny as you get older and start to get your own job, having more money is actually more difficult.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
It's kind of sad to think, after a certain point, you kind of become a financial battery for everyone else.
That yeah, even having a job doesn't seem to provide you enough money for your hobbies. That's very sad to think of, especially if your hobby is something like Warhammer, which is
I get the impression it's very expensive.
oh yes. Oh yes. It was like I don't know, I think I could easily spend like 2 or $300 on a shopping trip to get more models. I don't know exactly how much I spent.
The models not only are very expensive, but if you mess up, it just never looks good.
Right. Well, it's not just the models, it's the paint, it's the paint and all of the other kind of stuff that goes into making a model look really good. Like the craft sand or what's called flock, which is like that fake grass that you see on Warhammer models. Or any I say Warhammer, but really any kind of tabletop
Figurines.
miniatures game. The same processes go into it. It's just that Warhammer and its cousin 40K are the most popular.
They look like fun hobbies. I've definitely wanted to get into them, but I don't know. For me, it's like I really want to do it sometimes, and then sometimes I have absolutely no interest. And it's hard for me to justify getting into something that's so expensive.
And I definitely have those waves of interest where it's like where not maybe not like buying Warhammer models specifically to play Warhammer, but I think about like making my own miniatures war game. And Warhammer models are just so good that I'll buy some of those and use them as kind of stand-ins for the characters in my own miniatures war game. But like for making your own game, what do you think of like game development or video game development that is?
I used to have a very big interest in game develop. I wanted to be a game developer. I still do to a degree, but sometimes it's kind of that like waxing and waning kind of interest.
It's definitely I've definitely had that too where I believe it was Unity I was trying to work with and learn to program, and I made like a simple asteroids game. But like I think the part of game design that I want to do is like designing the systems and making sure the game is really good. The technical part is kind of out of my grasp, or at least it's not something I can really teach myself how to do. I'd have to learn from somebody.
I would love to do the game art for something, kind of develop and build the world. I would really enjoy even writing for the world, creating stories, developing. I think that's a very fun time.
At least for video game development, it's that world building, and for me, the game mechanics that interest me, if not necessarily writing line after line after line of code, which is the most important part. I figure if I were to develop a video game, I should, at the very least, learn to code myself.
Maybe we should get a group of very skilled individuals together and maybe look into something like that.
Yeah, start a little indie game studio would be really neat.
That could be a fun time. Take the become neats off of work.
Well, speaking of that, I forget his name, but the guy who made Stardew Valley was a NEET.
Really?
Yeah, I read about this guy. What was his name? Eric Barone. I think that's how you pronounce it. Eric Barone. Yeah, apparently the story is he was a NEET being supported by his girlfriend, which already you have it made. And he spent some time developing Stardew Valley, and now the guy is a millionaire.
I mean, that goes to show you if you have a good idea, you can really arguably make your dreams come true. And you know what? I don't know if they'll ever hear this, but good on his girlfriend. Good on you for letting him do what he wanted to.
Absolutely. And I bet that girlfriend really is happy she did that.
Oh, almost certainly. That game has made so much money. They are living comfortably forever off of that game. And to be fair, it's a
Yeah.
great game.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the game you make has to be good.
You have to have a good design, you have to have a good idea. I think that having that support structure to letting someone kind of do what they need to in order to build something great. Well, that kind of brings up the question though. Is that neatdom? He's working on something.
That is a good question. I would say, like, he was making his own thing. He was working, yes, but he was not employed by, say, a game company. If Eric Barone were working for a game company, they'd make him work on, I don't know, Call of Duty or something. And he made his passion project, and it ended up making millions of dollars.
I guess this kind of goes into the topic we were covering, which is his hobby turned into a source of income. Like he probably just threw it on the store, not knowing if it was going to blow up or not, and it just turned out that literally everybody wanted a good Harvest Moon like game that wasn't Harvest Moon.
And that's a great thing about many hobbies is that you can leverage them to make money. And I would say if you're leveraging a hobby like that to make money, yes, you're working, but I would call that neatdom because you're working doing something you love and being comfy doing it. It's just you also make money doing it. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to.
I mean, yeah, circling back around to like you're learning the saxophone, you could arguably become a busker if you wanted to.
Yeah, I could busk and I have some plans to maybe not anytime soon, but when I become more skilled, I could certainly leverage my saxophone playing to make a little cash.
Yeah, whereas me, I do consume a fair bit of anime and Japanese media. I do a fair bit of reading of manga, things like that. I think once I am good enough to kind of know what everything is saying, I wouldn't mind becoming a translator for something like that. I think that'd be a really good way to kind of see a story before everyone else sees it.
And there's pretty good money in translation, not just of manga and anime, but in general from Japanese to English. There's a lot of demand for English Japanese speakers in Japan. It's just actually working in Japan is a bit trickier than just going there and getting a job.
I've definitely seen my fair share of translation jobs that are incredibly high paying for what they are.
Well, I think the episode was kind of all over the place. How do you feel? Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I think that we've covered a very wide range of hobbies, some more than others, but I think I've covered everything that there is to cover, really, that I can think of. What about you?
Yeah, I think we've cast a pretty wide net. I'm satisfied with what we've covered so far. I think in the future, I keep alluding to like future episodes because right now we're kind of giving overviews on everything. It'll be interesting to cover these things in more depth later, especially anime and what we mentioned about leveraging your hobbies into hustles that will make you money. I think that could be very interesting. Everyone, thanks for listening all the way through to the end. If you liked what you heard, you can help us out. In the future, there will be some ways to support the NEETwork directly, but for now, the best thing you can do is share the podcast and help grow the audience. If you're listening on SoundCloud, leave a like and consider downloading the episode. If you're listening on YouTube, you can click all the doobly-doos that help out the algorithm. If you'd like to get in touch with other NEETs and NEET hopefuls, well, we're having a Discord set up soon, but we still need a little more time for that. And with that, I think I'd like to say goodnight.
Stay comfy.